and welcome to Breaking the Cycle. My name is Alan Hyde, and tonight we're joined by a special guest, Mary Quattlebaum, owner of Heartwood Counseling in Colleyville, Texas. How are you doing, Mary?
I'm good. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
Thanks for having
Mary
me on.
is also married to a former guest of ours, Graham
Yes.
Quattlebaum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Got to see him go first and ease the anxiety a bit, so that was
Yeah.
helpful. Yes.
yeah, you guys jump right in.
Jump right in.
Yeah, I posted on Facebook a couple months ago, and Graham jumped on it right away, and now here we are.
Yes, Graham is he is more adventurous than I am, for sure. I'm he leads, I follow.
Yeah. Yeah. However, with your clinical practice, you started it, you led, and he came in with you.
That is true. Yes, there are some areas where I do lead and he follows. We turn it around. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your expertise, your background.
Okay.
And for those of you listening along, we're going to talk a little bit about treatment for those who struggle to find resources if they're experiencing, I guess the term, and I'm not always sure exactly which terms to fit at any point, but neurodivergence, and we're going
Yes.
to talk a little bit about that tonight.
Yes.
Why don't you give us just kind of a rundown of your specialty, working with it, and some of the areas you're passionate about?
Okay. Yes. So in our clinical practice, through professional experience and personal experience, which I will preface with, I promised some certain people in my life and my family that I wouldn't talk about them on this podcast tonight. So we'll start there. But in my personal life and professional life, I really started to see that just the increase in prevalence of individuals who are neurodivergent, who are seeking counseling services, and being not necessarily mislabeled. I mean, their other therapists were correct in anxiety, depression, OCD, some maybe difficulties and social challenges, but weren't getting to the root of what the issue really was. And even in the professional field, I started seeing a lot of misunderstandings or mislabeling, or maybe just lack of knowledge in that area. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to learn about this.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you have been working with, you had mentioned kind of level one, right? And so
Yes.
how a lot of times that gets missed when we're talking about the spectrum. We've talked about that on this show before, but while we have access to someone who works with it consistently, levels 1, 2, and 3. This is my
Sure.
my generic
General
understanding.
Yes. Yeah.
Could you give us a breakdown of what each level is?
Sure. Yes. So if we're talking about someone, and I will say that even in the field of autism, I would say the top experts in the field that I've worked with are frustrated by those levels, right? Frustrated by the terms high functioning, low functioning, because it's not a true it's too, I don't want to say binary because we've got 3 categories, but 2 black and white, right? So, but just for general purposes, we'll say level 3 is someone who would be primarily low verbal ability, and most likely having some mobility differences. And
Like tics and
there can even be mobility differences in walking, in just general day-to-day movements. It doesn't have to be tics. It doesn't have to be, we're talking about just difficulty getting around, difficulty doing basic life things like using the bathroom on your own or being able to care for oneself, right? So someone who has level 3, the general public is going to encounter them and they're going to automatically identify that they have some differences, right? Level 2, you're going to see people who have that to a lesser degree, where there may be some communication or mobility differences, and that's what people are going to see. There's also sensory sensitivities. There's all sorts of neurological differences that people see, but they don't really understand what they are. So we'll have that to a lesser degree with level 2, and then primarily level 1 people may go their whole life without ever being diagnosed. People, they used to use the term Asperger's. People may be thinking that they might be a little odd or quirky, but not recognizing that as fitting into that category of autism.
Yeah.
And then when you have women, primarily most women with level 1 autism will never be diagnosed in their lifetime.
Yeah, it's similarly statistically with things like ADHD and those types of diagnoses. It's fascinating, the similarities in the not getting diagnosed. I think one of the things I was hearing as you were sharing just the different levels, I imagine for just the average person, they think, right, level 3 autism, right?
They think Rain Man.
Yeah.
They think Rain Man, right? Which is the movie we all grew up with, with Dustin Hoffman, driving his car in the driveway, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I'm curious if that's kind of where some of the pushback is a lot of times, where the conversation is definitely open to something that has been a reality for as long as humans have existed. We just have more words for it now. But in the 70s, 80s, 90s, right, if someone had autism, right,
we put them away.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, we put them away.
The sane asylum or the loony bin.
Yeah, they, I'm trying to, a lot of them early on were labeled with different things and put away and tucked away, and so society didn't encounter them. And as, properly, we don't do that anymore, although there are still lots of autistic families who really struggle to care for their level 2 and level 3 loved ones that are still really needing resources like that, where they need residential, long-term, lifetime residential treatment in a setting that's not traumatic, right, or not harmful.
Do those exist these days in any kind of meaningful? Yeah, I imagine you would.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about living communities where you might have people rooming together, and they have care professionals that are coming in and caring for them, like what you would typically see like a care facility be for perhaps maybe like the elderly population. But we have that for people with autism who can't be safe at home, whose families need that support, where they go and they live in a community, a living home, and then they come home on the weekends.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And are there any locally here in like the Dallas-Fort Worth area that we're aware of?
I'm sure there are. That's a good question. A lot of the clients that we see, now I'm not going to say that we don't have clients who don't have level 2 or level 3 autism that we see. That is what we see to a much lesser degree than what we see level 1 autistic clients at our practice.
Yeah. I want to kind of take a step back too, because I was curious if you had anything that you would share on, like, why do you think it is that certain diagnoses, especially neurological diagnoses, oftentimes get missed with the female population or aren't being caught?
Gosh, I have to look at the men in this room and be like, I'm sorry for saying this, but I think women are more adaptable. I think women, socially, you're going to see. Well, I think the expectation of women is essentially anyways that they're going to be less assertive, right? Or that they're going to be more quiet, or you might label them as shy, or you might label them as, they're just introverted. But then also women are better at masking. Women are better at covering it up. Women are better at coping with it internally, whereas men have more of a difficult time doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about even in some of the quote-unquote traditional conversations, a guy is going to be exposed by other men in that real quick, and it's going to be made out to be some, like, detriment.
Deficit.
Yeah. And that's...
unfortunate.
Yeah, very.
Very unfortunate.
Yeah. What would you say to that, to men who are experiencing those things and or maybe hearing words to their experience tonight that would just encourage them that it's not a deficit, and how to start kind of turning in this direction? Sure.
Well, I think I want to kind of talk to all populations here, and that, I think the autism thing is a buzzword right now, especially when we have people of our government talking about it, and whether it's a bad thing, it's a burden, or whatever. And I've heard a lot of people's response to that being of positivity towards autistic people, which I think is great. I do not want to discount the struggles of individuals or the struggles of families that are caring for autistic individuals and experiencing great difficulty in doing that, or the difficulties that autistic people experience in general. But with that being said, I tell people in my family that I'm pretty sure that the greatest advancements of the world were made by autistic people. I mean, really, if you think about the greatest scientific advancements in the world, if you think about what has driven our society forward and the discovery of that, if you want to really go back and look at history, that's all autistic people that have done that.
Well, and to support it as well, it's like it's well documented that a lot of major inventors have what we would traditionally a couple of years ago call Asperger's, right? That we now are distinguishing between the different levels of the spectrum. Because, and if you've ever worked with autism, remember when I used to work at a continuation school back in the day, the middle schoolers I worked with were on the spectrum, and you saw all the levels, and some of them were so focused on one thing. I remember we had this one student could tell you down to the nuts and bolts of like what they used on the planes in World War II. He knew everything. Yeah.
Right. And there is, in a lot of the trainings that I've done, because I've done this huge amount of extra training and time in the field of neuropsychology, what we do know is that individuals who have level 1 autism, all of those, when we would see a younger child with, my goodness, help me with the word, where they have delays, right? You might see in level 2 or level 3, you might see a lot of developmental delays. In level 1, you're going to see developmental advancements where they're ahead of their peers or ahead of other children their age, have some unique abilities that are quite beneficial, really, when you think about.
Yeah, typically when you mathematics, hard sciences, things like
I mean, just it doesn't even have to be that. I mean, there's so many misnomers, there's so many misconceptions. I mean, clients, I don't want to talk about any of my clients specifically. I love my clients, by the way. I could talk about, just how amazing they are all the time. But it doesn't even have to be something mathematical or scientifical. They have this topic. They know about it. They know everything about it. And they are amazing at that thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's just another way in which we're all unique, And, there's a real humanness element when I hear you talk about it. And, obviously we're talking about some of the clinical aspects, but I think anytime I've sat down, whether on this show or in clinical settings, to discuss autism spectrum, it's about reminding people, and also us as professionals, staying in the fact that they are human beings. And that was always an interesting one, because IEPs, right, for students in school, and you're sitting there with the parents, and you're having to remind other professionals in the room that, hey, this isn't like just like a pet. This isn't an object.
Right.
This
We're talking
is
about
a student.
a human being.
Human. A kid.
Yes.
Right.
One of the things that really frustrates me whenever I get clients, and I have this all the time. I have this probably every day. My last therapist said I can't be autistic because I have empathy. My last therapist said I can't be autistic because I have good social skills. I'm an extrovert. My last therapist said I can't be autistic because I can look you in the eye. And so there's a lot of ableism, I think, mindset when it comes to autistic people, that there are inherent things that they can't do, and that's absolutely not true.
Yeah, ableism.
Right.
Yeah, I like that word.
Right.
Let's define it for those who've never heard it.
The assumption and speaking of someone in a way that says that, okay, so you can't have autism because you're smart. You can't have autism because you can look me in the eye. You can't have autism because you talk a lot. You can't have autism because you're smart. You can't have autism because of X, Y, or Z, right? That's ableism to assume that a certain population of people must have some inherent disability that is obvious to others. Yeah. Which is not true.
Right. Yeah, I assume we could equate it to like, they're not suicidal because they haven't communicated a plan, or they're not depressed because they're out at the market today.
Right, yes.
I think another way to really drive that point home, and I'm sure you would agree with this, is it's like going to sit down with your doctor. You have pain, and they're telling you don't have pain.
Right. Yes. Yes. So nothing makes me roll my eyes more than, even in the clinical field, the misinformation that is, I would say, given to clients by therapists who, they're not bad, they just don't know.
Yeah.
Or these huge misconceptions that the general population has that I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. They're a therapist, but they give bad advice.
Well, or they're a therapist, but this, they just don't know about this topic.
Well, it's such an interesting line in our field when you start to transition into the neuropsychology.
Right.
And a lot don't do the due diligence. And then even when you enter that realm, it's like, well, my specialty is all in how the brain's affected by substances, not autism. All right. So I think, it's just a good call for any professionals who tune into the show week to week is consult, talk to people who've done the research.
Be careful speaking on what you don't know.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Because it harms clients whenever they say things like that,
Yeah. Well, and this is one I've always been curious about too, with just the distinctions of levels 1, 2, and 3 autism, but also this kind of like phantom issue of like the diagnosis of ADHD being very heavily diagnosed, and I imagine there's some bleed over.
50%.
Okay.
So if you put 100 autistic people in the room, 50% of them are also going to have ADHD, comorbid ADHD. Yeah. So there's a huge comorbidity there.
Yeah. So not necessarily misdiagnosed, but focused. I guess my curiosity is, especially through the 90s, was such a push for that diagnosis, if sometimes the focus was there and things were being missed.
Absolutely. I do have clients who were children in the 90s, got diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm like, well, buddy, let's talk about autism. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because we missed that piece of it.
Yeah, and do you find that your clients are embracing that and it brings them relief once those things are kind of brought into light?
Most of the time. I would say most of the clients I have, it's like this huge sigh of relief of, oh my goodness, I'm not bad. Oh my goodness, I don't just suck at life. Oh my goodness, I'm not, I can understand myself through that lens. Most people breathe a sigh of relief. Now, I have some people look at me and they're like, there's no way that I could have autism because, look at me, right? Like, they also have that ableistic mind about what autism is, and that's okay. Yeah. I'm talking about that. And they get to choose how they want to pursue information about themselves or if they want to pursue that further.
And this is through a pretty thorough assessment process and...
Yes. So I don't want to call it like an autism radar, but you develop that. You develop that. And I'm not walking around diagnosing the general public because that would be unethical. But you learn to just be in a group of people. You learn to be in a gym full of teenage kids and see mannerisms. You learn to be, and I'm talking about level 1 autism, you learn to see someone from across a football field and notice things, right? So when you have a client in your office and you get to know them over a period of time, you start to notice those things. You can provide screening tools. And then one of the things, we are really expanding our services for individuals with autism in our practice, but one of the things that we are going to start doing in the fall is I will start doing the psychological evaluations for the purpose of official autism diagnosis, like the full, 3-day, 10-hour testing.
Yeah. Well, that'll be great. I know that's, especially in this area, I've seen a real boom and just a need for it. And I think anytime you're in a metroplex, right, you're in a city area, just the sheer statistics go up of people who need those services.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And especially the growing awareness around level 1 autism, that it is prevalent.
It is. It's very prevalent. And, there's so many talks about why that is. There's just these huge debates in the community
Yeah.
about all
What
of
is
those
it,
things.
like plastics and
All the things,
the
right?
funny ones. But
Yeah.
it's like I am curious what you might have to say about, like, why is it just that the awareness is raised? Do you think some things have changed that have impacted in pregnancies? Or, like, what do you think is kind of a factor?
So I will say that any opinion I give is not based in my own scientific research, because I'm not a researcher,
Yeah,
right?
I'm just asking you.
I will tell you that in the trainings that I've done with some of the top autism specialists in the country, right? And I'm just like in awe to even get to be in their class. The first thing that they will tell you in the first 5 minutes of that class or training, vaccines do not cause autism.
Oh, yeah, I mean.
They will tell you that, and it's weird because it's like this statement that they all like have to say at the beginning
almost
of
like
class.
a disclaimer.
Almost like a disclaimer. It's interesting, and I've always been so curious about, like, why are they saying that? Where is that coming from? And I just have to say, I don't know the answer of why it exists or what causes it to exist. I have to say that the beings way smarter than me have way more information. But one of the things that we have kind of tossed around, that we do for sure know is this idea of genetics. When I talk to my clients who have autism, I'm talking to them not just about their mental wellness and their neurological, the wellness of their nervous system. I'm like, have you gone to the doctor? Have you had your genetic tests? Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? Because counseling is the smallest piece of the things that you need to do to, really support yourself in this diagnosis. Often it's one of the most insignificant pieces counseling is. But they do know that there's about 100 genes that you can test and point to that are common genetic abnormalities in those genes that we know that a lot of autistic individuals have. I know some individuals who have had those genetic testing, and those genes that we know that are commonly associated with autism, usually those are going to light up like a Christmas tree in people who have those genetic tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we know that.
Yeah, well, and such is the case with those kind of, I would call them irritating. Some people find them fun. The conversations online about, well, what causes these things, and then it causes political turmoil and all these things. But go figure, right? The conversation is always much deeper, but I think on a societal level, that's why it kind of devolves into like, well, the vaccines did this to my kid. It's like, well, that's a lot easier, I think, to palate. I'm thinking like if I had a child, right, it'd be a lot easier for me to palate that it was the government's fault than maybe something in my genetics.
It could be, absolutely. So some of the if you really are if you are an autistic parent, or if you are someone who has that in your family, I would say that a lot of times the opposite is true. That people find that very offensive. Like, you're saying that I gave my kid autism because I vaccinated him, instead of the fact that maybe this just could be genetics. And I think a lot of autistic parents are quite willing to take a look at themselves. Usually the kid gets diagnosed first, the parent takes a look at themselves, and they're like, oh, really? Like this, that's how it's genetic, right? So let's just go up the family tree. Yeah. And then you realize, okay, it's Grandpa, it's Uncle Steve, it's everyone, right?
Yeah, well, it's always Uncle Steve.
So there's that. So yeah, well, I would say just this is my only thought about the vaccine thing. I don't know. Maybe, for sure. I mean, maybe, I don't know. The top minds say no. I haven't researched it. But, I heard a member of the government recently call autism a pandemic. Well, we know without vaccines, we're definitely going to have pandemics, right? We're going to have polio. We're going to have measles. We're going to have COVID. We're going to, so we can't just get rid of vaccines. That's not the solution. So what are we going to do?
Yeah. Yeah, it can never be, well, the solutions in those discussions are never binary, like we were talking about earlier with certain things. There's always a gray area. Well, I guess leave it to two mental health professionals to conversate in that space, but that's how we stay in a place of peace to find solutions to. often come back to this, it's a perspective on anger, right? But it's like, it's easy to be angry. It's hard to be angry in the proper ways at the proper times, in the right ways with the right people. That's hard, right? And I think that's a very proper way to look at discussions around very hard things for families to palate of like, you know, it's easy to get angry that this thing exists. It's a lot harder to say, okay, how am I going to act now that we have the information?
Sure.
And it's not, and the interesting part, I guess the dynamic part with the family is most families I know that have been impacted by it, they handle it very well. It's society at large, a lot of times it does not handle it well.
Absolutely. And I think if I had a child that I had to take care of for the rest of their life, I would be devastated by that, right? And there would be an impact, just a significant impact to the rest of my life and that child's life and all those things. I think when we're talking about level 1 autism, where this is something that really we have someone who's going to need some adjustments and some support, right? It's almost like this invisible thing that other people are like, oh, well, you're just like making a big deal out of this, or oh, you're just you're just trying to follow the trend right now and jump on this bandwagon, and like no one in your family has autism, so stop making that up, right? So there's a lot of individuals that experience that too. Yeah,
the stigma is always going to be really strong. I guess the way I would equate it too is like to, let's say, a stigma around addiction, right? It's like, is it genetic? Is it a spiritual malady? Does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter, right?
This is who they are at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why they have this. They have it. Like, we can't go and undo that now. So I know it's with a lot of our level 1 clients is that people will tell them, well, you're not autistic enough. And then other people will tell them, well, you're too weird to hang out with me,
Yeah.
You're not, so.
Yeah, it's a bind.
It is a bind.
And it's, I think it's a social media construction, right?
Sure.
On one side of it, right, that you were touching on, which is like, oh, you're just going with the trends. It's like, why would it, we talked about this a couple months ago with one of the guests of like, people do want to feel like they fit in. And then I think another axiom that most people, let's say like you fancy yourself a normal person and you're listening to this and you do believe that people are just going along with trends, you've got to kind of ask yourself, why would they want to go along with that one, right? It's, there's all of these different dynamics that come with it. There's a known stigma. People are treated poorly. There's a big community, and they probably have the best events around. But they're
really fun get-togethers. Yeah.
But there's drawbacks to these things as well. So it's a fascinating conversation. But social media definitely takes it to the negative.
It does. It absolutely does. And I mean, can't we all just be nice, right?
Yeah.
It's already hard enough to live in this world.
Yeah. Does it it's like, does it really matter to you what your neighbor's dealing with behind the closed door?
Right. I mean, I guess it does.
Yeah. Well, for the average codependent, probably.
Right? Yes, absolutely. So.
Yeah. So, you're working with this day in and day out. You have some other specialties. I know we wanted to definitely dive in on this one. Do you want to talk about some of your other specialties? Do we want to dive into just kind of some of the things that you recommend for each level, and when you're working with these individuals, what direction do you want to go?
Well, I would, if it's okay with you, I would really like to talk about specifically like the lack of resources for specifically level 1 autistic people. Can I talk about that a little bit? That's
Absolutely.
like one of my passions.
Yeah. What are some of the resources? So refreshing for those maybe who are jumping in now. There's level 1, 2, and 3 autism. Level 1, they're pretty high functioning.
That's what we're going to see in private practice for the most part, right?
Gotcha.
That's what we're going to see in private practice.
So let's make that distinction too. And as you tell us a little bit about the resources and lack of resources, there's a presentation of level 1 autism that comes into a therapy office, which is pretty high functioning. There's a level 1 autism that isn't seeking services. What's the divide, do you think?
Okay, so, well, first of all, I'm going to say most level 1 autistic people out there that exist on the planet right now don't know that they have it. Okay, so there's that. They don't know that they're going to say, you know, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have OCD, I have ADHD, I have challenges in my relationships. Those are the things that they're going to come into therapy for. And most of the time they may go to multiple therapists before, you know, some therapist who's trained in that says, hey, you know, have you ever thought maybe you might have autism? And then they're just like totally like it's this identity crisis, right? So really what we've seen just in our personal and professional experience is most individuals with level 1 autism are not going to get diagnosed until they're for sure over the age of 10 if they get that diagnosis. Probably until they're teens, because what happens is I can't tell you how many times I've heard a parent say, my kid can't be autistic. They were fine when they were younger. I've heard that so many times. Yeah. So many times. And what I tell them is that it's not that they're not fine now. It's that they got to a point where their developmental abilities have not, the social demands exceed their social capacity now. When they're 5 and you can run around and play tag on the playground, that's how you make friends, right? When you're 15, you're not running around playing tag on the playground anymore. You're having to have eye contact and conversations.
Yeah, and pretty complex conversations.
And all of those weird things that teens do. They've got to touch each other now, and they've, you know, and it's a whole different ball game, right? So that's number one. Is most of the time you're not gonna catch a level 1 autism diagnosis until someone's a teenager, right? And then the parents are like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why now? Well, that's why. The social demands now exceed their capacity. Yeah. So by the time someone gets to be that age, the window of opportunity for services for that kid is completely gone. Yeah. Almost completely gone.
Yeah. Any school-based stuff is pretty much out the window at that point. Most high schoolers aren't afforded therapeutic sessions, things like that. Yeah.
So really, when we were talking about level 1 autistic people, they don't really need talk therapy for the most part. Everyone needs talk therapy, but they don't need talk therapy any more than anyone else needs talk therapy for the most part. Right. In fact, sometimes talk therapy is the last thing that they need, because if you have someone who experiences difficulty with verbal reciprocity of back and forth conversation, sometimes I have individuals come in and it's like talk therapy is not appropriate for them because we're not doing any talking. Yeah. What they really need is they need occupational therapy. They need a lot of times they need a nutritionist. They need a doctor that's going to really look at their genetic background and look at a lot of their other things that they're going to have, because we know that there's other things that typically medical issues that are going to go along with it, even if they're minor. We need someone to look at all of those things, sometimes speech therapy. So, and ABA therapy is typically what you're going to see for younger individuals who have level 2 or level 3 autism, and it's to kind of guide some of those more stubborn autistic behaviors that some autistic people have, that like rigidity and cognitive inflexibility, and they haven't had any of that. Yeah. So now you get a 25-year-old who has level 1 autism coming into your office for talk therapy, and what do I do with this person? Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I like the call outs on occupational therapy.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, and I've seen this too, just from the outside observation, right. Whether it be consulting or in different treatment centers, without the occupational aspect of getting in the home, teaching them how to do certain things, just like any of us, the propensity to get stuck, they just get stuck in different ways.
They get stuck in different ways. And occupational therapy is about like helping their sensory processing disorder. It's about helping them with dietary things. Of a lot of times their body's not sending, their brain and their body's not communicating in ways that sends hunger cues, that sends other, just the sensory processing part of that. And so they need a lot of support with those things. You'll see a lot of challenges with feeding. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but you'll get, an adult in your office that doesn't eat all day, right? And then we have a whole other issue.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, right? Because I've heard that discussion as well. Because I work with all types of addictions, so I work
Sure.
with eating disorders, and so
Sure.
a lot of times you'll see that piece overlap sometimes in the beginning, where if you don't know the distinctions, it's
Right.
like, okay, well, I work with eating disorders each week. I
Right.
have a set of clients that I work with, and those things, and the presentations are very different from autism when they're having some feeding issues.
Right.
But if you don't know those distinctions,
You think it's an eating disorder.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think this is where a point you were raising earlier. A lot of times, clinicians that get in the field and they're thrown clients, and yeah, we were just reading the DSM-5 and it's being crammed
Sure.
in school and all these
Right.
things, but the distinctions and seeing these things play
Right.
out. And that's why I like doing this, having the conversations with clinicians week in and week out and exposing people to it, because it's very dynamic. It does take a lot of time. And so when people are hearing these social media clips, it's like always I like to give the disclaimer of like, just look into it a little bit deeper. There's a lot of things going on here. And more resources are always needed. We're also living in a time, curiously, where resources are being cut back in the name
Right.
of awareness. It's a
It's
shifting.
weird. It's odd.
yeah.
It's an odd dynamic for sure. Yes. So what we're trying to do at our practice at Heartwood Counseling and Wellness is we started offering different services. So we do have adult autism support groups for level 1 individuals. I think we've definitely talked about expanding that. I know Graham is definitely in the process of getting a group started for parents of autistic individuals, specifically parents who are caregivers, right? So that doesn't even exist. We can't find a group for that anywhere. So those have been successful. We've also started, I've started offering coaching services for some clients who they don't need, it's not that they don't need mental health therapy. I think, like I said, everybody does, but they really need coaching on some life skills.
Yeah.
And that's not therapy, that's coaching.
Yeah, it can't be billed.
Right.
And that's a bit of a landscape too in our field, is certain things that are really, really beneficial that just aren't billable.
That don't exist.
Yeah, that
That
people don't
exist.
even know to look for.
Yeah.
Until,
Yeah.
You touched on one that I've always seen working with my specialties with the family disease of alcoholism is like, just look at our nation. You can go any state, any county, any city, you're going to find a treatment center for somebody struggling with substances. But the major issue with any addiction is the family disease, and the family members
Right.
who are all affected
Right.
aren't getting any treatment.
Yeah. Yes. So we're seeing this huge gap of teens and adults not getting the services that they need, right? I think at one point I remember calling 30 occupational therapists before I had one that told me, we see teens, we take insurance, and we don't have a 9-month waiting list, right? Yeah. And it was like finding that unicorn, right? Because those things just don't exist. And we need those things.
Yeah, we got a buddy of the show. I need to get you her information too, because she's in the area, occupational therapist. Her name's Veena Raj. But it's nice, even though there is a lack of resources, that each time we have this conversation on the show, that the very, very similar things are being discussed, which just gives credence to what does work, what doesn't, and it helps our listeners who may relate to some of these things, that there are professionals in your area who are going to do the proper things to help you find the resources.
Yes, absolutely. I would love those resources because, a lot of times when you say, hey, we need an occupational therapist that specializes in autism that sees teens and takes insurance, you're like, well, that's no one, right?
Yeah.
Or we need adult autism life coaches. Well, you see it on Love on the Spectrum, but do you see it anywhere else, right?
Yeah, that's a good show.
We love that show. We watch it all the time. Just lack of resources. So we're trying to offer some more of those resources. Testing, autism coaching for adults for some life skills, whether they're social skills or whether they're other life skills, groups, those types of things, for sure.
Yeah, because you mentioned them, right? ABA services and in the county and things like that, applied behavioral analysis. A lot of times they're used as wraparound services. There's no way that the agencies, at least just when I was working in Orange County in California, there was no way the ABA services were going to be able to reach everybody who had the need.
No.
That's a huge part, I imagine, of the lack of resources is agencies exist. There's no way it's going to meet the need.
Right.
And then what do you do?
And they don't have it for teens.
Yeah.
They usually stop ABA at 12.
That's a good point.
Right?
Yeah,
So if you have a 13 to 17-year-old that needs ABA, and some do, right? Unless they have level 3 autism and they started ABA when they're 5 and they're still getting ABA when they're 15, no one's going to start someone with level 1 autism or even level 2 autism at ABA at 13 or 14. You just don't see it.
Yeah. Well, there really is, especially in our society, always existed. Once a person becomes the teen, you're not granted the rights of an adult, but you're treated like one. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And that would be, I imagine, I mean, it's a nightmare for any of us, but if you're struggling with social aspects and
eye contact
and
things like that,
it's like that's going to be a scary time that, hey, people are starting to treat you like an adult and you don't know why, and you have no recourse.
Yes, and so sometimes, especially teens who have level 1 autism in our office, it's very challenging. Talk therapy is already hard for teens.
Yeah.
And then you take a teen boy who has a level 1 autism diagnosis, and that's really hard. Talk therapy is really hard.
Yeah.
But they're too old for play therapy, right?
Yeah.
At that point, experiential therapy is helpful, but that it's also not really getting to what they need either.
Yeah. You know what I always found, and it's my favorite card game by far. I have a massive Uno collection, but Uno is where it's at, and people, they don't have to make eye contact. It's like there's simple things that we can do in our offices. I know you guys are doing over at Heartwood, where it's like, if they're having a hard time looking you in the eyes, go for a walk, right? Get some fresh air, or just do something kind of like with their hands, that is more play therapy-esque.
But I will say this: looking someone in the eye is a life skill, and someone has to teach them that.
Yeah.
And who's going to teach them that?
Right.
Who's going to teach a 15-year-old child with level 1 autism the skill of looking someone else in the eye? Who's teaching that?
Yeah.
Their parents don't know how to teach them that. There's no ABA available for them. There's no occupational therapy available for them. So then we have a therapist that is now trying to stress the importance of making eye contact.
Yeah, bridge that gap. Yeah, because there's a whole aspect that we know also. Let's say someone isn't on the spectrum of trust building. Yeah, and then kind of bridging into that place, because the parents don't know that that's, I imagine, a lot of times occurring, right? For a large reason why maybe they don't know to teach them those things. And then we have to deduce that, build trust, and then teach.
And that's, and so sometimes, I'm finding myself like, oh my gosh, I need an occupational therapy license, and I need to go learn, I need to go become a behavioral technician, and I need all these things. I need to put it all together, and then I'll come back and we'll have a center for autism.
I'm sure Graham loves that.
All the insane amounts of time that I do studying things. Yeah, but
it is needed, and I think, just kind of coming out here, immersing myself in this community, it seems like the right pieces are here for what you guys are doing over at Heartwood to expand on this.
Yes, I would say yes. My dream is to have a wellness center, maybe one day, right, where we have independent business owners and practitioners that are operating under the same wellness umbrella, right, in the same building, sharing the same waiting room, and someone comes in and they go to their occupational therapy over there, and they go to their dietitian over there or nutritionist, and they go to their, behavioral technician over there, and they go to their massage therapist over there, and they go to their, life coach over there, and, all of those things.
Yeah, it's, it sounds, I was joking about this with another clinician too. It's like, because that's a very common
goal
development.
That we all have, right?
Yeah,
we all want it.
It makes sense, and I just imagine, like, if I wasn't working in the field but I was a client to benefit from that, I was like, this sounds awesome.
This sounds awesome,
it's
right?
like a spa.
Yes,
for
it's
my
like
mind.
Yes, it's like a spa for my mind. It's my dream. We're gonna dabble in it, but yeah.
That's awesome.
So, yes.
Yeah. What other lack of resources are important to highlight other than in the home community type services like that? What are some of the challenges in the lack of resources? I know we've kind of been dancing around and touching on
Like
a lot
the
of it,
availability? Are you talking
yeah.
about that piece
Yeah.
of other resources that I haven't mentioned?
Yeah, yeah. Just kind of.
I mean, testing, I feel like I do feel like there's there's long wait lists for testing. I think I kind of touched on everything. I think the biggest resource that our community lacks when it comes to just any individual that may be struggling is just kindness and understanding. I feel like that is the biggest resource that's lacking.
Yeah, yeah. Don't be so hard-nosed on things you don't understand.
Yeah, don't.
I say it out loud to remind myself in life.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and there is absolutely nothing bad or shameful about having autism, right? Like there are some of the most brilliant minds of our generation, of the world, that are walking around out there who already have a diagnosis and haven't shared it, or don't have a diagnosis yet. And I'm not going to just paint it pretty and say it's all like that, because it's not all like savants and gifts and awesome memories and amazing skills. There are people who really struggle, and families who, like I said, are going to be caring for people for the rest of their life. It's so broad. But at the same time, like it's not this this plague that we need to just like figure out by, what is it, like October we're gonna have it figured out. Is that what I heard? Right?
Oh, is that the political musings these
Yeah,
days?
is that by October we're gonna know why all these people have autism. We're gonna figure this out.
Oh, God
Yes.
bless America.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, good old manufactured answer.
Right.
We're awaiting.
Yes.
The kindness piece, it's like that's the one thing I've always, just if I'm just to speak from my personal life, I have always noticed in my life, I'll walk in a room, I'm ready to be social, I make eye contact, but I'm also just nice to people. And ever since grade school, I've always had one or two buddies who are on the spectrum. They trust me, right? They're looking for that love.
Yeah.
They don't need to be anything but themselves.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
And I think we all just need more people like that in our lives. It's like, none of us are going to be perfect with those things, and I can think back to grade school of like, yeah, I probably could have spent more time when I think about some of the buddies from back then. And there's maybe more kindness that we could all have at those ages, but especially in adulthood. One of my men's support groups back home, I'm 6'5". One of my buddies there, he's a big dude too, but he's on the spectrum, and a lot of the dudes didn't know how to interact with him. It's like, I don't know, how about starting with hi?
Right.
Give him a hug.
Yeah, he's just a normal human.
He just ate it up. It's like, no matter how socially awkward or if someone's on the spectrum, I think a good thing to remember is that people just want to be loved. And they just want to be acknowledged. They want to be heard. They want to feel like you
And they
care.
don't want to be treated differently,
Yeah.
right? They don't want to be treated differently.
It's like a person.
Right. I'm just a person who has this diagnosis. It's not any different than in any other diagnosis. This does not define who I am. This is just one small piece of my identity.
Yeah. And there, any individual who's ready to meet in that space is really good at meeting you there, and I've found that with individuals that I've interacted with on the spectrum is like anybody else. If you meet them there, they meet you there. If you treat them with kindness, they're ready to reciprocate. They just may not do it the same way that you're used to, but who does?
Right.
And I think that's where society's real interesting in that way. We have societal norms. And anytime it strays out, that's weird, that's odd, that's changed, I'm scared of that,
Right.
when we're surrounded by differences.
Yeah, and I mean, gosh, the world would be super boring if we were all the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Less conversations about dinosaurs, I know that.
And trains.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
trains.
I'm kidding. Yeah. Stop. No, that is a total stigma and joke. It's just a joke. But yeah, like, we'd be having lots of less cool conversations about a lot of things.
Yeah.
That's for sure, right?
Yeah. Well, it's, one of the humorous aspects of Love on the Spectrum. It's like, it's why everybody loves the show, because they just talk. They're just willing to talk about things they're interested in.
Okay, so gosh, this one really bothers me. My last therapist said that I can't have autism because I have empathy. Watch that show and tell me that those individuals don't have empathy.
Yeah, they are.
Oh my goodness.
Walking empaths.
Walking empaths. And I'm going to say most autistic individuals are walking empaths.
Most I've ever met, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we only have, I'm not going to get political, right? We only have a few out there.
You could do whatever you want.
We only have a few out there waving chainsaws and acting like buffoons, right? That's not what we see with most autistic individuals.
I'm assuming you're referring to a specific politician.
Yeah, right,
That's okay.
right. But see, that's it's such a misnomer. It frustrates me so much when people say that. Well, I can't have autism because I have empathy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's another social media construction.
It's just, or, I can't have autism because I'm smart.
Yeah.
I can't have autism because whatever. You know?
Yeah, that one, just having worked with it, it's like, and having these conversations, because I'm smart, it's like, man, I've sat with plenty of autistic clients in years working with kids that definitely could solve equations I can't do and can write papers I can't write and interact in different ways that I don't know. It's like the intelligence is a lot different. Well, it's like I also teach clients about the difference. We all get taught about IQ, but no one gets taught about EQ.
Right.
Your emotional intelligence.
Right.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with your overall IQ.
Right.
Yeah.
And even, people who are autistic who have average IQs, everyone's amazing at something.
Yeah.
Right? IQ is, that doesn't mean anything.
Right. What's interesting too is like, how we were kind of calling out that show and we were talking about how like they'll just have conversations. They'll be very empathetic. It's like how many times I'm sitting in therapy trying to teach like a dude how to just talk about the things he's interested in. It's like, hey man, I don't know, why don't you go to the Wednesday night meetup with the card games you enjoy and just talk to another guy about it, Like, oh, I can't do that.
We can't do that, right?
It's like, come on, man.
Yeah, I'm convinced that I'm convinced that society would be better if we had more autistic people.
Yeah, kinder for sure. Maybe less bombs. I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other just kind of why so passionate about this topic? What pulled you in?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask me that question. Personal experience. Personal experience.
I know you said in the beginning there's some that you said you
know
weren't going
what?
to share about.
I'm
not going to push
I'll have to leave it at personal experience. I'll tell you this. I am deep in the process of having my own autism evaluation. It is, you wouldn't look at me and say, she's an autistic person, right? Would you look at me and just make that assumption?
No.
There are things I would say. There's my outside of my house self, and then there's the who I am in person that only a select few get to see about me, right? I'll tell you this story about Graham and I supposed to go on a date one night, right? And he's like, all right, like, I'm going to go to the bathroom where you're ready. I'm going to go to the bathroom. We're going to hop out of the house real quick. He comes back. He's like, oh, man, what are you doing? What are you doing? Well, I'm just reading my news app real quick. Okay, well, let's turn it off and let's go. I'm like, well, the history of Israel. What do you think about that? I'm reading this article. And he's like, I don't know, but, we're going to go. I'm like, well, hang on just a second. Like, we never made it on our date, right? By the end of the night, we've got this enormous poster board, right, of the history of Israel. I've got my Bible open at some point. We're going like all the way back, and it's fun. Yeah. I mean, that's fun, right? And so I think as people go through the world, especially when you're a clinician, right? You specialize in something that's personal to you. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Isn't that all kind of what we do?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I got in real early. It hit me like a ton of bricks kind of on the side of the head of like, there's a reason why I'm working with the family disease of alcoholism, and it's not because I've never encountered it before.
Yes. Yeah. So if you just look at the generations above and below in my family, like, you know, we're all there. We're all there. Amazing, brilliant people.
Yeah.
People who've really experienced some challenges in some areas.
Yeah.
Right? That would have greatly benefited from the opportunities that I have and the information and the knowledge that I have and the support that I have and the support that I want to provide to other people.
Yeah, I think that's the bingo. There's brilliance in it, right? It's like just the age that we live in and the fact that these conversations are more prevalent, but it was happening before too. There's a brilliance in being able to look at here's what I experience, here are my struggles, here's what I'm willing to look at. And hopefully for those listening and for us in this room, it's as much as we could possibly muster to look at all of it.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, you know, something that affects us personally, we got to learn everything about that, and we got to be the expert in that, and then we got to make it to where other people don't experience the difficulties we had. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what being a therapist is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say in a nutshell, yeah.
That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, let's shave the time off this mile. What do you say?
Right, yeah. Let's do that, yeah. Let's make this easier for the next go-round.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So for those who are listening, maybe they are wrapped up in more of the negative messaging that's happened on social media, let's say over the last decade, around ableism, around misdiagnosing, around being a part of like the popular crowd by labeling yourself with something they maybe think isn't real. What would you say to the non-believers?
I mean, I guess I would just say, like, why does it matter to you? Why does it matter?
Yeah.
Why does it matter to you? Right?
Yeah, that's a t-shirt.
Why does it matter to you, right?
Yeah.
Why does it matter to you? Just lead with love and lead with kindness and ask questions and seek to understand. And yeah, like, am I allowed to say a bad word, right?
Fuck. No. Chance, you think we're allowed to cuss on here?
Okay. Yeah. Just like, I actually have a sweatshirt that says this: don't be an asshole, right? Like, just don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Right? It's that simple. Don't be an asshole. Period.
I would agree. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, life's already hard enough.
Yeah. Don't be an asshole. Right. That's it. Yeah. That's my advice. Did you hear that? Don't be an asshole.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Okay. All right.
How are we doing on time, by the way? We're good? I saw you moving over there. Right. I have a question that I ask all the new guests. You've heard this one before because you were in the studio when Grandma's on.
I've forgotten it already, so.
We're going to build a mental health amusement park, and you get to build a ride. Oof. What would the ride be? What would you call it? What color would it be? What would it do?
I'm going to build a ride in the amusement park. It's the waiting room.
The waiting room?
Yeah, it's where people who don't want to get on the rides go to sit.
Yeah, it's where they can do all their research on Israel.
It's where they can do all their research. It has poster boards, markers, access to the internet, right? It's called the waiting room.
It's just called the waiting room.
It's called the waiting room, right?
Are the chairs a certain color?
You know, we're going to have spinny chairs. We're going to have all of the like sensory seeking chairs, right? Like the big physical therapy sports balls. We're going to have the spinny chairs. We got to make sure they go up and down. We got to have our feet on the floor, you know. It's quiet in there.
Nice.
It's quiet in there. Everybody does their research in quiet.
Yeah. Air conditioning?
You know, yeah, like not too cold though. Okay. And that's where all the people go that are going to wait for everybody that is going to go ride the rides, but we're not going to ride the rides.
Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah, I got to get all the details.
Yeah.
It's 70 degrees. It's not too cold.
Yeah, you know, maybe like 72. 72.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to have quiet snacks in there. No one's going to be chewing loudly.
Okay.
We'll have quiet snacks.
Nice.
Yeah, and people can interact if they want, but they can have their own little pod, do their own thing if they want to. Right? Yeah. It's their recovery time, right? Because I know when everyone gets off those rides, they're gonna have to talk to people again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yep, that's it.
With our captive audience.
Yeah.
Any last thing that you would share with them?
Don't be an asshole, right? That's it. That's it.
Fair enough.
That's it.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Yes, you're welcome. Thanks, Alan.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Quattlebaum, owner of Heartwood Counseling. We break the cycle here every Friday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Join us next week for another guest. Take care.